My name is Stacy Downey at Aussie Adult and Family Education on behalf of our State Director, Michelle Johnson, and our professional development partner, Dr. Heather Bruce at the University of the District of Columbia. And on behalf of the Aussie Adult and Family Education team members who are on today, we'd like to welcome you. Thank you for attending. Introduce you to Megan Farrell of Mustard Seed Training, who is conducting this series of 7 one-hour trainings for us on accessible online tools for contextualizing learning. And the way that we've selected each of those 7 sessions is, of course, using the high demand industries selected by the WIC, the DC Workforce Investment Council, to make sure that they are highly relevant and immediately usable for you and your work. So thank you, Megan. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you all for taking the time to be here this afternoon. I know you all have many responsibilities and students that you're working with, so I really appreciate you taking this time for us to reflect on our practice and improve. So as we go along, I know we have a mix from our previous sessions. I know we have a mix of folks on who, some of whom have been doing this work for many years, and others who are just getting started, and everywhere in between. So there will be a couple opportunities for you, especially if you have existing resources that you're using, or you want to talk about your program and what you're offering. There will be a couple places where we stop and give you a chance to do that. We will be using the chat for that. There'll be a couple points where I say, hey, toss in a word or two on this topic, on this question. And then with some of the longer questions, especially when we're talking about resources, if you do want to take yourself off mute, you can do that and share. We'd love to hear from you. And then at the very end, when we're done with the formal session and questions, I can stay on and we can talk and network. If you'd like to do that, I'd love to hear more about what everyone's doing. So I'm up here in Ohio, and construction is a big industry up here too. So a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. My organization's Mustard Seed Training. I work in adult ed professional development. I've worked for, written a book with Neuters Press, worked as the national trainer for essential education for a couple of years. In my current business, I do a little bit of training like this. And the other side, so the link that you have in the chat here, the blog.mustseed.org, that is kind of my adult ed side of the business. Every morning and afternoon, as we're doing sessions, we're having a new post here with whatever the topic is. So if you do go to that site, the upper left-hand post will be whatever the most recent post is, whatever our topic is of the moment. So you have construction here. And I know we all wear many hats. So I also am in manufacturing, a small business owner myself. On top of the professional development I do, I also am a woodworker and work with a small artisan team here in Northeast Ohio. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well as we go along. But on the blog here, you have a little intro, and then you'll see the slides that I'll be working through, so you can follow along from there if you like. And then there's also a document here with contextualized lesson plans. So I will show this document on the screen, so you can just follow along on the screen if you'd like, but you can also have it accessible right here on the website, especially for future reference, and it has all the links in it as well. And also, Stacy has commented that these sessions all the sessions will be recorded and they will be posted on the Aussie website as well. So feel free to share those with colleagues. So that is me. And we are so grateful to Aussie and for UDC for sponsoring this session and all of the materials that they sponsor to support your work. So we'll talk a little bit more as we go along about some of the other resources that they have sponsored to support you, especially as you're preparing folks for the workplace. So our big question for today, and this is where you can put in a word or two in chat. You know, you don't have to write a whole GED essay on the topic or anything. But when can teaching trades save lives? What do you think? I mean, I know some of you, again, have been doing this, or as you're thinking about the impact of the work you're doing, maybe just a word or two in chat about when can teaching trades save lives? What is a moment or a scenario or a situation, or even just an adjective? And I know some of you may have a whole band of little camera and mute, etc. And there should be, if it's a little one, it might be under more your chat. So you have that. Troy says, when you have a person who is looking for a career that's fulfilling, absolutely, really can change lives in that way. Awesome. I know sometimes there's a delay as folks are typing. Do, 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 do. We'll think a little bit about this. And if you are typing, continue to do so. I'm going to show a little photo here. So when you focus on some of these relevant skills, and especially these days with increasing PPE requirements and other sorts of things, when folks enter the trades, when they're brand new to the job, those especially in the field of construction, the first 6 to 12 months are when you have the most career-ending injuries or fatalities. So how you prepare folks for the trades for those first 6 to 12 months, and especially when you're focusing on things, not only just getting the job, but also those on-the-job skills that can help them keep themselves and other folks on the work site safe, you're really going to do a lot. And nowadays with preventing the spread of disease and all of those different things that we have going on, you have a lot of opportunities to really transform and save lives. And to get to Troy's point about having a career that's fulfilling, it also increases the quality of life, not only for that individual, but for their whole family and the community in which they live. So today's goal is to show you a little bit about how to improve, or not improve, but add to your important work that you're doing. I mean, you really are making a huge difference in people's lives and in the life of the community as a whole. So as we talk about contextualized learning, I'm going to give you a blank template that you can use for any lesson plan that you want to add industry content into. I'm going to walk you through a sample lesson plan specifically for construction, where you're going to get a whole ton of resources. And usually when I present, all you would see on the screen are these slides, and you'll notice I have all of these different tabs open. And over the course of the session, we are going to look at every single one of them. And then I've also ended with a kind of a laundry list of picks that are specifically available to you as DC educators, especially through OSSI or through your one-stop career centers. So I am a firm believer in taking notes, even by hand, even when I'm on the session. I have, every session I end up taking notes on things folks have said, on your programs. So what you're going to want to take notes on, I'm going to go through a whole lot of materials, but you are the one who knows your students, you know your neighborhood, you know the specific jobs that you're preparing folks for. As we find a resource that you like, you want to jot that down, because you can go back into the slides, you can go back into the lesson plans, but tomorrow, next week, next month, when you really want to, when you're ready to implement this, you want to have that handy. Yay. So another question for you that you can pop a word or two in chat, maybe an adjective or a moment description. What is contextualized learning? We keep using this word. It's in the description of today's session. We're talking about contextualizing or something that is contextualized. What does that mean? And just try like one adjective or word in chat and we'll see what our different ideas are. Or if you want to we are a good enough session. If you do want to take yourself off mute, you can do that and share a word or two if you like. We have some thinking going on. Jana Lee, feel free to correct me. Learning that connects the lesson objective to the real world or the context of what students are learning. Absolutely. That is right on. So you have the context of where students are learning. Sometimes it's a context that they're familiar with. Sometimes it's a new context they're going to enter into. Beatrice says, enable students to apply new knowledge and skills to real life situations. Absolutely. We're talking about getting as concrete as possible. Whether you can get them on the work site, that's wonderful, but especially with a lot of the hybrid and online learning, using real objects or photographs, videos of on-the-job training, absolutely. These are great examples. And feel free to keep typing if you are in the process. So this template that I'm about to show you is something that we developed here in the Cleveland area. We did a project where we developed, you have 7 in DC, we had 5 kind of hot industries where it was either high growth or it was high growth specifically for entry level jobs. Go Browns. Yes, my husband would agree with you. I'm actually from Pittsburgh originally, so I'm a Steelers fan. But yay! It's good to see somebody else from Cleveland. And you can see I use a lot of orange and brown in my slides. So we developed these contextualized lesson plans for our area and for our hot industries. And we developed this template. We developed a whole list of lesson plans for all 5 different industries. And then after having used these for about 5 years, we got a second grant to revise them, improve them, get some feedback. And some of the feedback that we got from our folks who were piloting them in the field was that it would be helpful to have a more clear template, like to have them a little more standardized in their structure. So that was my job as one of the contributors. They liked the way I organized my lesson plan, so I kind of went back and standardized everybody's plans and ended up with this template that I'm going to share with you that you can then use to make your wonderful lesson plans for your students. So this template is very, very fluid. You don't have to do everything on the list. You don't have to do everything exactly in this order, but just roughly, we like to make sure there's an introduction where we have some kind of question to draw people in. This is especially important because as adults, we know not everybody shows up at exactly the same time. So, people have busy lives. And so you want to reward the folks who are there on time, but you also want to give people a chance to kind of filter in. So introduction serves that purpose. Your contextualization is what's going to answer that question, why do I need to know this, right? And as adults, we want to know, how am I going to actually use this? Just answer it with real life information so they don't even have to ask the question. Direct instruction is when you are doing what I'm doing right now. You're kind of talking about introducing an idea, walking people through an example. And then guided practice is when you're working together through a scenario, through a practice problem, through a calculation, whatever, and you're kind of doing a back and forth where they're having to think a little bit about the work that you're talking about. Exploration activity gives them a little more time to really absorb the content. And often these are in very hands-on activities, especially in construction. And then personalized learning is your chance to use, especially a lot of our digital tools, to allow folks to work on things at their own pace. And I'll talk a little bit about some examples of that later. Then we usually end up with some kind of wrap up, feedback, teach back. And then we have some ideas at the end for differentiation, which again, I'll talk about a little bit more later, and assessment together. So all of these lessons are available to you for free. And there's many hundreds of pages of these lesson plans available at the Literacy Cooperative of Greater Cleveland. So it is completely free, but they do request registration. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned, it was piloted and it continues to be a field research study where we are using the feedback from instructors to hopefully, in another 5 years when we have to revamp everything all over again, we can go back and say, here's the ways folks are using it. Here's what they want to see improved. There's 5 different areas. So you just fill out a little registration. Within a day or two maximum, you'll get approval to access, and then you can download these as documents. And each document, we're looking obviously at construction today, but there's also healthcare, manufacturing, digital literacy, and hospitality. And in construction specifically, we actually have 4 documents there, one for each subject area on the GED test. So, and Stacy has put that link in the chat if you would like that. So our construction curriculum in particular was a collaboration between Youth Build, the Associated Builders and Contractors, Ohio Guidestone, Literacy Cooperative, who I mentioned, Mustard Seed Training's me, blah, 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 blah. The county, the libraries, everybody had their hand in it, bringing this together. But the goal basically was you had the Associated Builders and Contractors were bringing people in. And of course, they were discovering that some people would go all the way through their technical training and still not be able to pass the exams at the end. And that was because a lot of them were having difficulty with some of their basic math, reading, and there, of course, is some science and social studies in there too. So Youth Build came in and developed this curriculum that we're seeing here. They worked with a lot of out-of-school youth who are preparing for their GED test. So the way that they organize this set of lesson plans is there is a set of lessons, and there is a lesson for each, not only each major subject of the 4 subjects, but also within that each major content area that the GED testing service has established has its own lesson. So for those of you who are GED test instructors, you'll see that organization work really well for you. So our model lesson is going to be on classical civilizations. And I think this one is a really interesting connection between how do we talk about history and talk about today's workforce at the same time. As we get there, though, I just want to talk about some of the strategies that you always want to make sure are in your lesson. We've already talked about what it means to contextualize using real-world examples and scenarios. Interdisciplinary means you're always teaching two things at the same time. In this case, this particular lesson plan is for social studies, and it's for the GED test social studies, but we're also teaching construction specific information. And you'll see there's a little bit of math and language arts all in one lesson at one time. And this differentiation, I mentioned that word before, we have kind of a section for it on every single lesson plan. And it has the heart lock because this is when you open the heart. This is when you say to your students, I see you. I see where you are. Everybody is in their own different place, right? People have really interesting gaps, right? Some people have really high maybe math levels, but their writing level is really down there. Or maybe they know math pretty well, but then when you give them a fraction, they freak out. So differentiation means when you see that somebody needs extra time, you give them additional practice, a different way to explain it. But if somebody finishes really quickly, you also want to give them the go ahead and some additional activities to kind of explore at their level too. So differentiation gives you tips to kind of manage the multi-level classroom that we all deal with. Specifically, I want to look in this lesson on how it is interdisciplinary. So we start off with our contextualization. The activity we're going to look at is construction techniques in ancient Rome. And then another way that we make this connection with building and history is doing a temple building game where they have to look at 3 different types of Greek columns and match them. And then we pull in some of the GED test content so we can look at some of the vocabulary that they might look at. Now, the GED test is very much a skills-based test. So some of the other high school equivalency tests are like, you know, your nightmare, at least for me personally. My nightmare test in social studies as a kid was when they would give you, you know, the 50 question multiple choice and you needed to know trivia on, you know, who was the, I don't know, the general in the battle of Napoleon's whatever in 18 something something. You know, I don't remember those details very well. It's just not my strong point. So in the GED test, what they really are trying to test people on in social studies is they want people to have a little bit of background knowledge in history, kind of a big picture view. But what they really want to do is they want to be able to stick social studies content in front of a student and have them, or a test taker, and have them be able to figure out how to answer these questions. So you might see a picture kind of like this, and they have to use the context to figure out what the vocabulary means. But of course, you're also teaching them vocabulary that's very relevant to the workplace where they want to be. And then, of course, you do want to do some explicit, if you are preparing for the GED test or you're preparing for the CASAS test or whatever test it is that you're preparing them for, you do want to make sure to bring in test questions that really look like what they're going to see on the test. Because, of course, there's the context of the real world of the construction site that we're preparing them for, but there's also the context of the test. And the more you can give them test questions that really look like what they're going to see, the more comfortable they're going to be when they're in the testing center taking that exam. So I mentioned how social studies is very much a skills-based test, but it is also limited in what topics it's going to cover. So our lesson plans have something covered for all of these different topics. And again, the students don't have to know all details about the civil rights movement or the Cold War or macroeconomics, but they do have to have kind of a big picture understanding of each of these areas because they might encounter it on the test. So we focused on classical civilizations. Another really helpful, if you are doing GED test prep, is these high impact indicators. So again, you know, don't try to do the huge laundry list. Here are 5 skills that you can focus on that are going to improve that most people miss on the GED test. So in this case, we're describing people, places, processes, and events, and especially their connections. All right, so let me pop over to our lesson plan and you can see how this looks like in the context of the classroom where you will be working. So we talked about our lesson. Always start with objectives, right? You have to focus what you're doing. And our introduction is, what is civilization? What does this mean, right? Again, we're looking really big picture. And we have a little bit of background information here if you do want to use that as a reference. But then at this point, you know, they're assuming that you're kind of progressing through U.S. history and then getting to world history. So you talk a little bit about the GED test and exactly what's on it, again, so they're prepared. We're going to skip ahead a little bit to our construction and contextualization because this is really the meat of what you are here for. So how do we introduce construction techniques through history? This is one example that was used in this particular class for Youth Build, and you saw that little example. They pulled several examples from this site, not everything word for word, but to look at, hey, these are things that were constructed 2,000 years ago, and they are still standing today in Rome. So these techniques really work, obviously, and they're still techniques that we use today. So here's the way we build arches, right? We start with some more flat stones. Then you have your more curved arches, and then you have your keystone on top. So you can work through with them, you know, maybe giving them the blank, working out how to label different things, or just going through and talking through some examples and trying to make some connections to things they may have seen on the job site. Hopefully they've seen an arch or two in their time and maybe even built one. So you can make those connections. And then if they need a little bit extra, or you also want to pull in Greek architecture, we have this link specifically to that content in Khan Academy. So this is another way where we can say, wow, how would you construct something that lasts for thousands of years? This is something the ancient Greeks worked out. But we can also see that there are connections visually between the way they did things and the way we do things today. And one of those connections is columns and how they're constructed. So to have some fun with columns, this website created, it's just a little bit too big, this ancient Greek temple building game. So this is a printable that you can have available either in person in the classroom. Now we're all in hybrid settings, right? We don't know, some of us don't know from one day to the next. Are we going to be in person? Are we going to be virtual because somebody's sick? So you can also post this if you're using Google Classroom. You can stick it in there. If you're using email, you can attach this document, and there's a teeny tiny little link. Download the game here. That's where you get the PDF. But they cut these out, and then they're trying to match based on either the vocabulary or the style, the games. And you can do this as flip card games, kind of like memory games where they're all flipped over and they have to flip it. And then you can also make this a speed game if people are in pairs. See if I can get it faster than you. You can make it a go fish game. There's a lot of ways to make this really interactive. But again, the skill that they're learning here is not necessarily that they have to memorize these terms, but they have to be able to see new terms and figure out what they mean in context, and specifically in their construction context. So after we do our construction contextualization, we'll do a little bit more prep for the GED test specifically. So in social studies, we give them a little bit of practice, give them some reading materials. This comes from PBS. So they have this two faces of Greece where you're looking at Athens and Sparta. And there's, again, you don't have to do everything that's in this lesson, but using some of this text as content for them to read and as kind of their prompt, so to speak, like you have on the test, right? Usually they have a prompt and then they're answering questions based on that. So you can use some of the information from this email as prompt, or this website as the prompt. And then here's some activities. They can work on describing people, environments, and events from these two civilizations. They can write a paragraph making connections between these civilizations and also making connections with society today. How has Athens and the democracy that they created impacted our democracies today? How does Sparta and their military culture impact our military today? How does the architecture that they created impact how we are doing construction today? Kind of practicing their skills and thinking through making those connections. Excuse me. And then another exploration activity, and again, we have tons of activities in here, depending on how long your class is. They had with Youth Build, they had these kids all day, and they'd have several hours in the classroom, and then they'd have several hours on the job site. So they had the luxury of kind of covering, spacing out their activities over the course of, say, a morning or an afternoon. Whereas I know when I taught, I was lucky to get 2 hours at a time, right? Usually it'd be an hour and a half. And so I would have to break this up into multiple sections. But another activity for you is Alexander the Great, another classical civilization that they will probably encounter on the test, and very connected to Rome and to Greece. And you can also pull in activities from any classic civilization from this period. You can pull in the Aztecs, you can pull in the Ming Dynasty, you can, pull in Ethiopia, you can pull in a lot of different history here. But again, the point is to kind of give them an overall view that these classic civilizations have introduced things that still impact our society today. Then once you've done a lot of group work, then you want to give them personalized learning. Even if you're working one-on-one with folks, you want to give them some personalized learning time where they're going to work at their own pace. This is that differentiation. But the example we have for you of GED Academy is something through Essential Ed that OC offers you. They've purchased for your programs. So what's great about GED Academy is you can give students a login, and the assessments there will actually assign them the materials, only what they need to study for the test. This is also a great place for them to be looking at test problems like they're going to see on the test, and they can work at their own pace. So that is what you can, if you want to have a certain period of time where, hey, you could be working in the computer lab, or maybe, you're doing hybrid, you can only do so much on video conferencing or even on the phone. They need some time to be able to continue to work on the content without having to be keyed into what you're doing. So GED Academy is perfect for that. And then, of course, you're going to have your exit ticket or some kind of wrap up at the end. In this case, study.com is a great resource. They have an entire GED social studies course. And you do have to create an account. They have a free trial period, but also some folks have used this, teachers in particular, to kind of give their students access in the classroom. They have a lot of great videos and quizzes and other things that you can kind of project and folks can do in their seats, work on in their seats. And then we have some additional differentiation activities if folks are finishing too quickly, if they need more help. there's some ideas there for you. All right, so we have this whirlwind of resources from GED Social Studies and from construction that you can use to kind of keep students engaged and connect them. And this is, again, you can kind of see how the template connects to what we've seen in the industry. So we already talked about GED Academy as a highlighted resource for you, but also one of the certifications we've seen in several DC programs is this NCCER core. So the core, is anybody using core out there, by the way, already who's on the call? If you are, feel free to say, yay, I'm over here in chat. But this is a great core is exactly what it sounds like. If you're going into a wide variety of construction fields, this is going to give you some of the basic skills that you're going to need to be successful on the workplace, like how do you work with power tools, basic communication. Jana Lee uses HBI Pact, which is very similar, excellent. And Melita does use core, awesome. So in addition to, of course, giving them something that looks like the GED test, if they're preparing for a certification like this, you're also going to want to give them examples of the kind of test questions they're going to get on that test. So probably, I'm guessing, the folks out there are using some of the textbooks that are related to your context specifically. So another way that you can contextualize a lesson plan is when we have this section that says contextualization in it, right? You can do your introduction, and then when you get into contextualization, you can pull examples directly from the text, and maybe you start with direct instruction, right? And you work through a problem where you show them how, and then maybe you're doing guided instruction and you're doing it as a whole group and as a class, make sure they understand the process, and then you give them, okay, here's 5 questions. Do them on your own, and then we'll come back together and talk about them and see how they do. So that's another way that you can contextualize if it's not for the GED test. It is specifically for the certification exam they're preparing for. And then every session, I like to highlight a program. I know there's lots of folks who are doing a great job in these fields already in DC, but especially for those of you who may be new to this area and want to know, okay, who out there is doing it. And this is another area where if you want to throw in the name of your organization in chat so other folks know who you are, where you're from, this is a great time to do that. So we have Youth Build here in Ohio. But you also have a whole Youth Build public charter school in Washington, D.C. So lucky you. And they are doing a lot of exactly what we're talking about that we showed in the curriculum. So again, and maybe you're already typing away, but if Jana Lee, Troy, you folks, and especially we've had some folks who have kind of filtered in throughout the course of the session. If you want to pop into chat and let folks know exactly what the name of your organization is, that would be helpful. Great, and Jana Lee works with you, Bill. That's you, hooray. Troy's with Congress Heights Community Training and Development Center, hooray. And I know we have some other public charter schools out there too. Oh, corporation, sorry, not center.
Melita might still be typing, but we also have Catholic Charities, which does construction and green construction at that as well as Build,
awesome.
as well as Congress Heights.
Very cool. So these are all great.
So we got Four Walls. Yeah, Tracy, and Four Walls hasn't chimed in yet, but Four Walls does a lot of things: plumbing, electrical, construction, and maintenance. Please chime in.
Hi, Stacy. This is Nedra Jones from Four Walls. My computer was on cold; it wouldn't come up. But yeah, Four Walls construction, and we use NCCER core curriculum.
Awesome, Ray. Thank you.
And So Others Might Eat was on this morning, and I'm not sure if they're on now, but they are also one of our construction groups as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's such a growing field, right? It's there's such a gap, skills gap there. I know there's a lot of companies that are just snatching up graduates as quickly as they can find them who have these kind of certifications. So you're really giving people that not just a foot up, but you're launching them into a great career with a lot of potential in it. So that's awesome. So those are some wonderful resources in terms of actual people and programs. You guys can connect to each other. And there are some, I'm going to close a little bit so we're a little less messy here. So I always end with this page of top picks for DC educators. So if if you've seen some of these OC resources before, which I hope you have, hopefully this will be a very familiar tune for you. But I want to make sure if you haven't seen this already, or if you've kind of seen it, but you haven't really thought about how it could apply to your construction program in particular, I really want to make sure you're aware of these. So their main page here, and I made it really big. So has a link to a bunch of resources, which I'll pop into the chat for you. And if you scroll down past this big box, these are programs that you would usually have to pay for, but are available to you for free through your connection with OC if you are connected with them. And if not, call them up. There is actually an email down here where you can contact them if you don't already have access to these programs. So Career Coach DC is a great way to find local information, and I'll show you how you can do browse careers here and go right into construction. Yay. And some of you, I think, are also doing maintenance and operations, maybe some design work, but we definitely want to see folks who need a high school diploma or less, or a certificate. So we have solar installation, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see salary information, and you can go further in to get even more details on each of these jobs. Essential Education has 5 products. So we talked about GED Academy, but also CASAS Academy, Computer Essentials, Work Essentials. All of these systems work the same way, where they use assessment to then assign just the lessons that your student needs to succeed. And then it has practice tests in all of them. So, and then of course you have reports back on how much time they're using, so that you can use this to extend the student's learning time and their time in the academy or in the essentials work can count towards their hours. Virtual Job Shadow is another wonderful online tool for career exploration. So if you're not using this yet, please make sure to dive into it and get your logins. So what this does for your students is they have an exploration roadmap. Basically, they take some interest-based assessments. Is anyone else using those, by the way? If you are already using Virtual Job Shadow and you're connecting it to construction, please chime in about how you're doing that exactly. But for any program, you can do a career assessment, and they'll kind of connect your interests and skills to what might be a good fit, or you can just explore the careers directly. But they have a lot of really, I mean, you want to talk about real world. They have videos and interviews with folks who are really doing the job. And thanks, Stacy, for putting that link in there. For construction specifically, we have, again, in the literacy cooperative construction curriculum, each lesson often links to industry magazines, and so there's some links in there. Skills to Pay the Bills is another great one for some of those soft skills and professionalism. OSHA, of course. I'm sure folks are also doing some OSHA certification as part of your construction trades. But their job is also saving lives and making sure folks are safe on the workplace. Library of Congress is a really interesting tool, again, for looking at historical construction. So making that historical connection, or the science connection too, if you're working with energy, like how does an old brick house compare to maybe a metal construction, or you can do a lot of comparison there. And then there's a lot of Quizlet, Khan Academy, study.com. These all have tons of practice for you in those academic areas. PBS Learning Media has, I think I have this specifically for social studies, but they also have a lot of information for careers in engineering and technology and professional development. So engineering and design. So, and engineering tech, I think, is also, they just have, I can't, I don't even know how to scratch the surface of what PBS Learning Media has to offer. It's some great stuff. National Archives, of course, in social studies, for civics. And political cartoons also can sometimes relate not only to, obviously it's the social studies connection, but sometimes you have a lot of workforce connections you can make there too. And if you are doing economics, and especially like once you get your job, how do you handle your money? You're offered a 501k. Okay, great. What is that? So Investopedia is a wonderful resource. I use it for myself to understand some more complex issues, but also I like it because it's really, they use a lot of plain language, and they're really trying to educate the general public on how not only to manage their own money, but how to get into investing, how to build their own wealth, and those sort of things. So let's let our folks take more money home with the economics we show them. All right, so I've thrown so many links at you today. And you're at the end of each of these documents, this contextualized lesson plan document, if you go into the table of contents, it ends with all web links by industry. So if tomorrow you're saying, oh yeah, Megan was talking about that thing that had a career assessment, I can't exactly remember what it was. Well, you can go right down here to construction on page 42 and say, hey, here's construction, and here's a link to each of those things. So of course, you're very welcome to go back into the lesson plan itself. We have a Word version of the lesson plan so that you can edit them, make them applicable to you, make them relevant to your students, your neighborhood, your situation. Use the blank template to kind of fill in where you like. But also, if all you want is the links, there they are. Alrighty. So I feel like we just got off the roller coaster. Any other questions or resources? And especially if there are resources that you're using in your program, it seems like a lot of folks are doing connections maybe between having similar certificate programs you're working on. Are there resources that you would like to share with each other, maybe even that weren't mentioned, or maybe there's a resource that I did mention that you would like to tell us how you're using them? That would be an awesome thing to hear now. And of course, if you have any other questions for me, feel free, but I also want to hear from you.
Feel free to unmute yourselves. We're
Yes.
a great size group, and so we can really use these last 11 minutes for a real conversation. So please unmute yourself and offer your comment, question, suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we were in person, this would be the really great time to do some networking and meet each other and hear what folks are doing. So, so if you can find that button on your screen. I know some folks were having a little technical issue with some of the muting before, so hopefully that's not the case now. I would actually like to hear, sorry, if you're about to unmute, feel free. Oh, here we go. Melita's telling us more, and then I have some questions for you all. So Melita's using the core curriculum, OSHA 10, Flagger, and CPR in the green construction program. Awesome. That's fabulous. And Melita, are you in one location in one specific neighborhood, or do you have multiple locations around the city where you do those programs? Wonderful. All right. And Troy, Jana Lee, I would love to hear more about if you have particular textbooks or if there are particular online resources that you share with your students as they're doing their construction and youth build. And Jana Lee using HBI Pact as well.
Yeah. Hi, this is Jana Lee. I'll unmute for a moment. My colleague Beatrice is actually a better person to talk about this, but she just jumped on. So let me, I can just tell you kind of from a big picture perspective. So we have used, I've worked with Youth Build for a long time now, and we have used NCCR at times in the past. We typically use HBI in part because it's a little bit more accessible. It's easier for students at different reading levels to absorb and learn. They also, when they moved last year when everybody moved, I should say, to virtual learning, they created a number of virtual online resources. So now folks can access those. And if you search HBI, I think it's HBI core curriculum, you can try that. HBI PACT, which stands for Pre-Apprenticeship Certificate Training Program. You can look at some of their resources. I think they're, right there. And I think you can access some of those online. I know they created a number of online modules, so that's a nice way. And again, I'm not a teacher. I support the program at and I'm not a curriculum director. I support the program at a higher level. But that's a great way to introduce students who may not quite be ready for higher level reading and writing that's sometimes required in the NCCR curriculum.
That's awesome.
So
thank you so much. That's super helpful.
You're welcome.
And Melita said that you use a Pearson platform for assignments so that you're giving your online assignments using that online platform. Awesome.
And Melita's program, this is Stacy at Catholic Charities, was actually using the companion online components of the core curriculum prior to the COVID epidemic. They were introducing that and using that as part of their action research distance learning program. So that was really great to see as well.
Awesome. That's fabulous. And I'm curious with folks, as you have been having to be hybrid, and Gary is sharing too, we have many students who already have some experience and are currently doing some type of work in the field, either for a job or personally. They have shared pictures or videos of their projects that we as a class can discuss and analyze. I love that. I mean, how much more hyperlocal and real world can you get? That's awesome. So yeah, you take the real world as your textbook, right? And especially in construction. I mean, if you can walk down the street, if you can tell people to, go outside and look at a building, and break it down into its parts, or even inside the building, right? Break it down to how it's made. That's awesome. And Gary's at 4 Walls. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I was also thinking about being here in DC, doing field trips and field studies with students and go around looking for those arches, right, and how they were constructed, and tying in, the Capitol, and so many books like How Black Men Built the Capitol.
Yes, I was actually thinking the same thing. I just did a Egypt on the Potomac tour by Tony Browder. And also, I was thinking a good way to contextualize with construction would be talking about the gentrification, not just the buildings, but talk about historical and, redlining and all of those things, because that should empower the students as well.
Absolutely. So you're pulling in, several different topic areas at the same time too, right? You're getting into the civil rights movement. You're getting into multiple points in government and all of those wonderful things. I love it. All right. So here's your Egypt on the Potomac. I'm gonna put this link in for you.
Oh yeah, that's essential. If you can take your students there, I highly recommend this. And it was actually one of my colleagues that recommended it to me, because it really gives some significance to the African presence here in Washington, D.C. that is often overlooked and not taught in the schools.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Melida, and I work for Catholic Charity, and I'm doing construction program. And yes, also we use a field trip, but we work with different construction company like Miller and Long, Baker DC, and Baker DC, they send us workers that already labor, so carpenter helpers, to our training 1 day a week, and the rest of the week they are working for them. And with Miller and Long, they request a permit, and we sometimes we take the students to the field to see exactly what that world is, and what they, if they really want to be in there in the future. Yeah, they can have an experience and also ask questions, and we're going from the foundation all the way to depending what phase is the building. But it's very, very good experience. They are very excited when we have to go over there. And the way how we empower our students is core curriculum is excellent. They cover 7 modules, and this is basically the foundation of the whole construction. Doesn't matter if the students later on they want to put their own company, they want to work for somebody else or for any industrial company or residential, they decide. But we guide them with the 9 modules that are safety, math, construction drawing, hand tool, power tools, material handling, communication skills, and of course, employability. So all that modules will teach them step by step for the new world that is in the construction side.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a wonderful connection to I mean, they're actually doing the work. That's wonderful. And can you give me one more time the names of the company that sent you workers?
Baker DC.
And how do it's D, how do I spell the last part, the second word?
BAKER.
Okay, got it. A construction?
Yes, and Miller and Long, they give the chance to take the students to a construction site.
There we go. Baker Construction.
Yes, that it is.
Great. And you said Miller
And Long.
Is that right?
Yes, Miller and Long.
Awesome. There we go.
Yes.
Thank
This is
you.
a big company in here, concrete company here.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes. And the good thing is that with Baker DC, that after they finish the core curriculum with us, they continue with level 1 of carpenter, and they continue with the follow-up of the students.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. We are very blessed to work with these companies.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for all of these resources and sharing and giving us concrete examples about how you are making all of this work in your own integrated education and training, construction, and building maintenance programs. We really, really appreciate that. I'd like to, one, ask that you would complete our evaluation, which is I'm not muted.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there I go. Thank you, everyone, for sharing all of these wonderful, wonderful ideas and suggestions and resources. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming to our construction segment today. We would like to invite you to complete the evaluation. We put the link in the chat. Let us know what you appreciated about today's sessions. Let us know what you'd like to see in the future and going forward. And so, Ms. Velez, all of the materials are posted on the mustseed.org blog.mustseed.org website, and we'll put it in the chat again. It's been at the top, and we've put it in throughout, but we can definitely send that. We will be posting the videos at the end of the series on the OSSI website. We'd like to invite you to join us tomorrow, Wednesday, September 29th at 10 a.m. for infrastructure. That session will include energy and utilities, energy efficient technologies, transportation and logistics from 10 to 11 a.m. And then from 2 to 3 p.m. we'll be doing law and security, and that will include things like physical security as well. And we will send out reminders and the links, and we hope to see you there. Please share this widely with your colleagues, with your partners, with your neighbors. There's no limit to who can attend these. These are open to all DC providers and partners. I'd like to thank Megan Farrell for another wonderful session. I'd like to thank all of you for such engagement during the session. Any other announcements, Megan? Our adult and family education team?
I'm just appreciative of the time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And we are going to stop the recording and sign off for now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.